We are always honored to have Dr. M. Zuhdi Jasser, who's the president and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement, former vice chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, host of podcast Reform This on the Blaze Radio Network. That doesn't make him a competitor, does it?
We love everybody.
I don't know. Author of the book A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Good morning, Dr. Jasser.
It's great to be with you, and I'll preface my remarks that they should listen to it not during the time of your show.
Thank you. Now we endorse the podcast. So there's so much to discuss on this, Dave, and you and I off air had a brief conversation about Keith Ellison. You know, I hear people going after Bannon. I understand the concerns on Bannon, on Steve Bannon. You know, you look at Breitbart, there are articles there that seem to be offensive. There are articles that are offensive. So one can question Bannon. But what bothers me is that many of those people go after Bannon are silent when it comes to Keith Ellison.
Could we just tell everybody who Keith Ellison is?
Yeah, Keith Ellison, senator from Minnesota.
A congressman, I think. Forgive me, I could be wrong.
Yeah,
when he was on the show, he was a congressman.
All right, congressman from Minnesota. And he is being seriously considered. Some would say he's the favorite candidate to be head of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. There's a history that Keith Ellison has that's very troubling. Am I right, Dr. Jasser?
Oh, absolutely. I can't believe he's being seriously considered. I mean, this man has been, number one, my primary nemesis nationally in my work. Secondly, just look at his history. After he became an attorney for 10 years, he was the spokesperson for Louis Farrakhan, one of the most virulent anti-Semites and hate mongers in the United States. Then he leaves Nation of Islam, becomes Sunni, runs for Congress, then now has become probably the most prolific fundraiser for the Council on American Islamic Relations, a group the FBI won't even work with because they won't condemn Hamas. He also went to Saudi Arabia and was under House ethics evaluation because that trip was funded by the Muslim American Society, a group the Chicago Tribune report in 2004 said is basically the Muslim Brotherhood in America. Our congressional delegation in Arizona sent him a letter when he came to raise money for CARE saying, please don't do that, please engage with Dr. Jasser and his group. He laughed at it and rejected it. Online, folks can see a debate I had against him in which basically he told the audience at the Hill when I was doing a briefing that even after I laid out the whole issue of political Islam and how it radicalizes Muslims and it's not compatible with American values, he said basically I give license for Americans to hate Muslims, to commit hate crimes, and basically he compared me to the slave owners that were black, the blacks that worked with the slave owners. And when he was interviewed by Dan Rather, he said, no, he never called me an Uncle Tom. He only said that I was similar to the blacks that worked with the slave owners, which is basically the same thing. I mean, he's horrible.
Yeah, he's got an interesting way of phrasing things. You know, it is amazing to me. I remember when Congressman King had the hearings on radicalization that takes place in this country, and you were testified there. Ellison went after you. And again, you were accused of inspiring anti-Muslim feelings. Like, you cannot have, this is the problem today. You can't have a candid discussion about a serious subject without being labeled, you know, some kind of phobe. God forbid you want to examine something critically, all of a sudden you are seen as some kind of hate monger. When you're discussing hate, you're the hate monger. It is outrageous.
And make no mistake, what does this represent? It represents sort of the establishment wing of the Democratic Party lost. So now the Bernie Sanders sort of marginal wing is pushing forth Ellison. Why? Because they're going to dig their heels in on the identity movement of the methods of the Democratic Party and sort of embrace their inner radicalism. And be it how anti-Israel Bernie Sanders is, be it their focus on the black community and rather than the issues of them, the focus on Muslims as a race rather than an ideology or an idea. All of these things are going to dig their heels in on identity politics rather than issue-oriented discourse, which is really, it just horrifies me on where we're headed and the polarization that this will do to America.
For those listening who hear the phrase identity politics, it's often not explained. Could you define it for people listening?
Yeah, identity politics is that basically we collectivize constituencies based on things that are identity, be it skin color, be it ethnicity, be it faith, that it's not based on debates of small government versus large government, Second Amendment rights, health care, defense, national security. No, it's not based on issues. It's based on a identity movement, be it the African American community, that they should all vote Democrat because they are black, or the Muslim community, they should all vote Democrats because the right is bigots towards Muslims, towards Islam, etc. Forget the issues. Who will embrace reform, who will embrace the issues of national security, etc. It's nothing about debate of which idea wins from a meritocracy perspective, but rather which collective group from a tribal perspective is going to be taken care of best by government, which is just horrible. That's not Americanism.
We're speaking with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He's the president and founder of American Islamic Forum for Democracy and several other things. But his book is A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim Patriot's Fights to Save His Faith. When you look at identity politics, one has to look at the Latino and population and women in this last election and ask the question, how'd that work out for you? Because obviously those two groups did not fall in line as the Democrats would have expected or hoped. And a major reason why right now we have President-elect Trump. With that being said, however, Dr. Jasser, the fact is there are an uptick of hate crimes towards all people, including Muslims. And in some ways, some have gone so far as to say, well, now it's open season. Might be a tad bit of hyperbole there, but what do we do with this increase of real problems? We see it in our own community here in New York. The next segment is going to be discussing a sweat sticker on a park named after a Jewish musician. What from your perspective, what can we say here?
Well, first of all, we need to be factual in that I'll be the first one. If they're going to make a registry for Muslims, if they're going to, someone I guess on Fox mentioned internment camps in a careless way, if that's going to happen, I'm going to be the first one to line up to go into those camps. But it's nonsense. This is not what they're talking about. We have to be accurate. With the registry issue, it wasn't even a registry for Muslims. It was about the national security entry-exit registration system, which Bush had in place for 8 years. Obama left in place till 2011. It was that people coming in need to register if they're from certain countries, not Muslims, everyone coming in, so that we could follow them, because we have less way to track visitors than we do our own citizens. That fear-mongering, where things are exaggerated, prevents an engagement of America on facts. Yes, there are some uptick in certain acts being done both against Muslims, Jews, and other minorities, but I would compare, if you look nationally, how the Jewish community, be it ADL or other organizations, are responding compared to Muslims, and what they're doing to stoke fears, I would just look on social media. The fear-mongering in my community is just unbelievable. There's people saying, oh, now they're going to put an M on Muslim houses like ISIS does with a N on Christians in Syria. I mean, seriously, they're comparing the American government now to ISIS, and nothing's even happened. Trump hasn't even gone into the White House yet. I mean, it's the exaggeration in order to stoke fears is just unbelievable. Let's deal with facts. And yes, call out Mr. Trump and his administration if they don't condemn things that are related to hate and un-American, but deal with facts, not with fear-mongering. But
there are more attacks on Muslims right now, and there is silence from the president-elect.
There has been, and all he says is stop it. I mean, he's got to say more than stop it. Yeah. He needs to articulate, and his handlers need to teach him the talking points of what America's about, that we're an immigrant nation, that Muslims need to lead this fight. The battle's against Islamists, not Muslims. He needs to go beyond the demagoguery that sort of got him where he is and say he's the president of all of America, and begin to shift from the old way that got him to where he is, because now he needs to lead this entire country and keep us together and unite us rather than simply dividing us.
Well said. I mean, you need a clear denunciation, not just stop it. I mean, I talk to my dog that way. That doesn't do very much. We need to hear a president any president, I don't care, Democrat or Republican, when you have an uptick in hate crimes and you're in the Oval Office, you need to come forward and address it. Look, I wish more had been said over the years when I see what goes on campuses. I mentioned this earlier. I go to some of these gatherings and people talking about the hate crimes, and that's appropriate. We have to stand together. But I think I look at some of these people and say, where were you? Where were you all the other times? As a matter of fact, there are some people there who are on the other side, who were against, who were silent because they supported what was going on campuses against Jewish kids. And now they're upset about, what they see as the rhetoric against their group. So let's be a little bit more honest about our conversation rather than just, having a political bent. So I agree with you. Talk about General Flynn. There's been all kinds of discussion now about comments he's made vis-a-vis the Muslim community and vis-a-vis Islam.
I've met him many times, and again, this is exaggerated. He's a great guy, an American patriot. He understands what we're dealing with. I think some of the comments that he's being criticized for, if you look at the larger context, he's talking about political Islam, Islamism, and ideology. I mean, if you look in The Hill, he had a piece in 2015 that he co-wrote with a Muslim about how ISIS is not the Islamic ideology, it's not what's in the Quran. If anything, it was almost more apologetic than what I say in talking about the need for reform. So, listen, they're going to try to, the fearmongers are going to increase, and anyone who engages and says, you know what, there is a major problem within the Muslim community, which is the theocracy, be it of Iran, of Saudi Arabia, etc. And he's one of these that has called it, and I think he's a great choice, as is Congressman Pompeo to lead the CIA. Hopefully he'll resurrect the section on the study of political Islam that was always part of the CIA that has never been used to the extent that it should. So, I think he's made some very good appointments so far. And of all the only ones I'm looking to see to change a bit and their method is Mr. Bannon, but we'll see how that works.
Yeah, and by the way, when you question Bannon, when you look at Bannon, you shouldn't be labeled as some kind of anti-person. Oh, you're a liberal. Look at Breitbart. There are some troubling pieces on Breitbart. I have a friend of mine who was journalism, Barry Weiss. She was a journalism student. I met her years ago at Columbia, and she's done a thorough analysis, and she's looking at some of the things on Breitbart. And when you see it, you say, wait a minute. Let's question Bannon. Well, why don't we have that right or responsibility? And the minute you do, all of a sudden you're labeled. But this is the climate in which we live. You have faced it for years. This is nothing new for you. I mean, you've maintained the battle against political Islam, and you've been labeled as Uncle Tom when it turns against his people. It's just shameful. I don't know how we progress from here if we're always going to try to back people into the corner based upon what our political thinking is and what theirs isn't.
Yeah, and I think what does Bannon represent? He represents a media that grew separate from the mainstream media. I was a friend of Andrew Breitbart, knew him very well, and this man was a hero of mine, and it was sad that he died when he did. I think Bannon allowed, as you said, some things to be written on there that are not consistent with conservatism, with libertarianism and other things, but that doesn't make Bannon himself a racist. It doesn't make him an anti-Semite. He's a friend of Israel. He's a friend of minorities. It's just that there was no policing, if you will, of a certain modicum of professionalism on some of the things put on there, but I think that it's exaggerated as to the impact that'll have. And yes, the conservative community needs to have a frank conversation about the influence of the alt-right and what is our obligation as Americans to marginalize them versus simply saying, well, they're voters, so we're not going to basically put them in their place. And that's what Mr. Trump needs to lead now that he's the president for all of America.
But Doctor and Rabbi, we look at just the men we've mentioned so far. Every one of them has huge problems. Believe me, huge. If I can be a little tongue-in-cheek, and we also say that the president-elect needs a handler to make sure he stops saying what he says. When do we come to the point that says that maybe we need? Why are we making excuses for these men? Is this the best that the conservatives can do? Every one of these men that we talk about, Flynn has got issues. I mean, by legitimate issues. Bannon has serious issues. Ellison's a Democratic issue, but I mean, when do we stop making excuses and start to demand excellence from these people?
To me, I don't think we're making excuses. I think what we have to do is have I think we have to have a very forthright conversation. Why is this permissible? Why is this allowed? I mean, you look at Breitbart, when there's an article there about Gabby Giffords, who paid a severe price, for someone who shouldn't have had a gun, and she's our human shield. When you talk about
That's
Jews,
Ann Coulter would say.
When you talk about Jews not being white, what's one of the columns by Saylor and Spencer about Ashkenazi Jews are not white, we got some serious, we need some serious questioning going on here. I get that. I'm not looking to exaggerate. I'm not looking to create hysteria. But when David Duke supports someone, I find that problematic, as I'm sure you do.
Yeah, and I'm at the end of the day, I'm not sure how much influence he's going to have where he is in the White House. It's not a cabinet position. It's not a chief of staff. It's not a press secretary. So I think ultimately, and the other appointments, I think the common thread is that finally, I mean, President Obama, when he went in, he did not have moderate appointments on a lot of the appointments he made, and the country survived. We were all, as a conservative, I was offended at his history and some of the appointments he made, and yet we've survived. So I think we need to hold him accountable. I can tell you from where I sit, it is refreshing to see folks being appointed that are going to at least not be afraid to engage political Islam. Hopefully they won't go too far and alienate the entire Muslim community. Hopefully the narrative will be an American one. But there's only been a few appointments. There's a lot more to be made. And I hope we'll be reassured and not more concerned.
All right. Dr. M. Zuhdi Jasser, president and co-founder, and founder, not co-founder, did it by himself, founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement, former vice chair, U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, host of podcast Reform This, and author of the book A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Thank you so much for being with us today, as you have been in the past. Always, it's an interesting exchange, and I think we need to hear more of these kinds of discussions.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Anytime. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Rabbi Joseph Batas, Deacon Kevin McCormick, Religion on the Line.